In this video, we cover learning outcome number 1, which is distinguishing between an experiment and an observational study. First, we have some definitions. In an experiment, we're applying some treatment and then proceeding to observe its effects on individuals. The individuals in the experiment are called experimental units, or if we're talking about people, we usually call them subjects. In an observational study, we are observing and measuring specific characteristics without attempting to modify the individuals being studied. So you can see that the big difference between an experiment and an observational study is in an experiment, we're applying some treatment. Usually we've got two groups, a treatment group and a control group, or a treatment group and a placebo group. And the treatment group is getting some treatment that the other group, the control group, isn't getting. Maybe they're experiencing a placebo instead so that they don't know that they're not getting the treatment. And then we're measuring the results afterwards. We want to see if that treatment works. So experiments are actually able to tell us about cause and effect, where observational studies are not. In an observational study, instead of treating groups and then seeing if there's some effect, we're just measuring things. We're measuring characteristics, and we're often seeing if there's a correlation between one characteristic and another characteristic. We're not attempting to modify anything about the individuals, and so we're not applying a treatment. Now, most of the time, if we're trying to look into cause and effect, we would want to do an experiment. But sometimes it's not appropriate to do an experiment because of ethical considerations, for one thing. For example, if you're trying to find the relationship between texting and driving and car accidents, it wouldn't be a good idea to have an experiment about that, because you don't want to force some people to text while they're driving and see if they have more car accidents. Rather than doing that, it might make more sense to go back and look at some data about texting and driving and see if there's a correlation without actually forcing anyone to do something that could be dangerous for themselves. So those are the main differences. On this learning outcome, we're trying to make sure we understand those two differences whenever we're seeing a description of a particular study. So let's look at some examples. So here's an example from the text. It says, in a study designed to test the effectiveness of acetaminophen as a treatment for lower back pain, 1,643 patients were randomly assigned to one of three groups. They were either assigned to the placebo group, which received pills, but the pills didn't have any medication in them, an acetaminophen group, which were given acetaminophen pills to take on regular intervals, or a third group, which were given acetaminophen pills, but they were told to take them as needed for pain. So the question is this an experiment or an observational study? Are we applying a treatment and then looking for an effect of that treatment, or are we just observing things? Well, I think we can see, since we put people into these three groups and the last two groups are receiving acetaminophen, and then we're going to ask them about their pain levels, this is an experiment, because some people are getting the treatment and others aren't in the placebo group. And then we're trying to see the relationship between that treatment and the effect on the pain. So this is an experiment. Here's another example. In this example, we're looking at a study of an association between which ear is used for cell phone calls and whether the subject is left-handed or right-handed. So when someone picks up their phone and they say hello, the question is, if they're right-handed, do they always go to their right ear, or do they always go to their left ear? If they're left-handed, do they always go to their left ear, or do they always go to their right ear? Or is it completely random? Are you left-handed and sometimes you still use your right hand? Or maybe like all left-handed people use their right hand or something like that. So you might think that this is an experiment because we are trying to look for the relationship between these two variables, but let's think about it further. We have to ask ourselves, are we applying some treatment to some group? Are we telling everyone to pick up the cell phone and use their right ear every time? No, we're not doing that. Are we assigning people to the left-handed group or assigning people to the right-handed group? No, I mean, they were born left-handed or right-handed. So we're not actually treating anyone with anything. We're just observing how left-handed people and right-handed people answer the phone. Since we're just observing, this is an observational study.